All right. Great to be here with Simon Breakspear. And I just wanted to give you a little background. I'm Ed Honowitz, project manager for the California Labor Management Initiative. And we actually connected with Simon through some tweets originally from Michael Fullen. And he's also worked with Andy Hargraves, who presented at our Summer Institute last year. So we've been in touch, and I felt some of the work that Simon's been doing, and a graphic he's going to show you really captured a lot of what we're working on now and people are thinking about in terms of how we move from crisis into sort of solutions and opportunity. So Simon, thank you very much for connecting, and give us a little background on yourself and what you've been doing.
Well, it's great to connect, Ed. And as we say in the Deep South, the deep South, g'day. It's great to join from Australia and to join from the future. One of the nice things about being in Australia compared to California is we're always the morning in front of you. I'm a research fellow at the University of New South Wales Gonski Institute. I'm there with people like Professor Pasi Sahlberg from Finland, who's moved to Sydney. I'm a former high school science teacher, and I spend a lot of my time trying to support school and district leaders build their improvement capability. But at the moment, Ed, like you and your organization and members, we're trying to think through how do you respond to something when there's no playbook? No one prepared us for this. There's no master's course in any of the education leadership master's degrees that kind of, preparing yourself to lead through a global pandemic. And so I'm working shoulder to shoulder with school systems around the world to try to work out how do we respond when there's no easy answers? How do we find new and better ways to collaborate? And how do we share lessons together so we can accelerate our likelihood of getting to an answer that can work?
Well, it's a pleasure having you here. And one of the things that caught our attention was, a great graphic that you put together, which we thought really would be something that we would want to share with people, which I thought captures sort of that movement and that transition across the areas. So Simon, maybe you want to share that with...
Yeah, let's see if the technology works, Ed. It's one thing that we're all trying to get used to at the moment. Does that come up for you?
Yeah, I see it very, very well. Thank you.
Well, look, let me just say, Ed, that, whilst I'm a researcher, I'm very keen to base most of my findings on empirical work. This is a conceptual model. And what I was trying to do with leaders, both here in Australia and New Zealand, but also I work extensively in parts of North America, particularly Western Canada. We're trying to say, well, maybe one of the things you need to do when you don't know what to do is to orientate yourself in a landscape, to narrate in some ways the story that you're taking part in, even though, of course, there's no easy answers. And so the first thing that I was trying to do is to help people realize that this probably isn't a crisis recovery curve. Like you in California, we in Australia, of course, have struggled with large fires over the last few years. And we know even in the last 6 months, our communities have often moved through a crisis phase and then have quite to quickly move into some sort of recovery, a return. And I think I wanted to try to help particularly district leaders and school leaders understand that it probably wasn't a get through the crisis and then just recover, try to get back to where we were. But actually there was probably a different type of narrative going on here. And so we were using this idea of this sort of this crisis phase that most schools and systems around the world entered early to mid-March. And then I was suggesting that there's probably then this adaptation phase, and systems in different parts of the world at the moment are all over the map on this. But this adaptation phase has typically resulted in educators particularly teaming and collaborating in different ways to be resourceful and to find new and emergent solutions to first moving to remote, and particularly with a focus on equity and serving and finding ways to serve our most disadvantaged members of our school communities. But then after remote, what we've been working through here in Australia in the last month is the return and what we're calling these hybrid models. Because getting remote working, remote learning models was difficult, but now all of the operational and technical decisions about how do we get people back safely. And we've been into that process. In fact, now in Australia, we're speaking here in mid-June, we've now have all our school systems returned for all students welcome to school. And so we're just that little bit in front, I think, of where North America is. But I also wanted to suggest, Ed, to people that there is kind of a hopeful opportunity that I wanted to be saying, particularly to educators who were just giving it their all, going above and beyond. You know, there's many people I know in parts who works in parts of the city who kind of couldn't do their job, and they were basically telling me they were out of things to do and watch on Netflix. That has not been the case for the educational profession. They have been digging in and pivoting and innovating and creating and collaborating like never before. And one of the things I was trying to suggest to people is that to honor that work, we have to be really clear that we're going to enter a phase of organizational learning from all those new ways of learning and working that have emerged. We have to honor that effort by saying there will be a time, it's not yet, to learn from it. And then after learning from it, making some decisions to weave some sort of new through line where we take some of the best of the new, connect it with the best of the old, the things we missed, and kind of create a sense of organizational renewal and learning rather than just recovery. And that for me is not a playbook. It's much more about orientating yourself in the landscape, being able to understand where you are right now. And I think when you know where you are, then you can, I think, make better decisions about what to focus on. And that's what we've been trying to help people have a couple of heuristics about if you're a leader, district or school, what are the sorts of things that you should be focusing on now, given where you are in that map.
That's great. I think, you know, as a visual learner, that's really helpful for me in terms of thinking through this. Quickly, before we go, what should district leaders and school leaders be thinking and doing right now here in North America? You know, we're just entering into about a 60-day period before school starts, and or even less than that. So a couple of quick thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, look, I'd say just a couple of things. One, and hey, you know, I'm not in North America right now. You know your context best, but obviously you're in the adaptation phase. So for me, some of the things to be doing during this phase is to set ourselves up to be working in a more agile way. Notice here, Ed, I'm not actually saying what to focus on. I'm actually talking about how to set ourselves up to be able to be resourceful and to work through a series of problems that are going to come at you. And your problems are going to be contextually unique. And so I would be making sure as a district team or as a school team that we've got our planning set up to be short cycle 1 or 2 week pivot plans, and to be having routines like Silicon Valley kind of agile stand-ups. So in my teams, we got into that kind of sense of we have a clear pivot plan that can be adjusted any day, that we have a regular daily or every 2 days, a stand-up meeting. What have we done? Where are we stuck? What are we going to do next? So the first thing is to set up the routines and process for rapid reprioritization. Secondly, I'd be thinking about, given that we have our distance from our people, how to set up quick pulse checks. So this is often done by little surveys, 2 or 3 questions to students, to parents and caregivers, and particularly to staff, just tuning in on some of the questions that you shouldn't assume you know the answer to. So little questions about their overall level of energy and well-being, their level of confidence on the next stage of the work. There's things, so we say you've got to go out and get rapid feedback, pulse check, so you've got the information to make decisions. Thirdly, set yourselves up to do some rapid cycles. So both in remote learning, but also as you think about the return, it's not going to be a return to our model. Every system I'm working in the world has something like a 3 to 5 stage return. And so you won't get it right the first time. It's not that people aren't able and intelligent. These are complex problems. And so get yourselves ready to set up and think about, okay, are we going to send 2 school year groups back? What would that look like? Are we going to be sending kids back in alphabetical last names so that they can go with their siblings? There's all these things actually on the return that there's so many different permutations. You have to set yourselves up to rapidly learn and test. And districts, we often want to get things right the first time because these are kids, right? We want to get it right the first time. But I want to say, get yourself set up to move in rapid prototyping cycles where you put up options, option A, option B, option C. What would that look like? What are the trade-offs? Okay, let's go. But you need to be willing after a couple of days or a week of getting into that mode to then update your thinking. All right, update that thinking with a real user mindset. You know, as a parent, we were there waiting for the school to say, okay, you know, are the siblings of the same family going to get to go on the same day? And then how do they work that out? Or is it year groups? And then the ramifications for work, and particularly in our most disadvantaged communities, the ramifications of having kids home multiple days from the same family. What does that mean for that that mother, that father to be able to work? And then lastly, I'd say this idea of over communicating, Ed, that you can't communicate too much right now. And with the political landscape, you know, in education, where often the layer above the district, there's a lot of messages that you may not know about until it's released in a media release. I think really communicating with clarity and getting down to kind of the 3 messages you're going to land over 2 weeks, and to communicate that wherever possible via video and by audio with a regular cadence. They need to see your face and hear your voice to help them narrate where they're up to. So they're some of the things, Ed, that it's very much about how do you set yourselves up to move through and find better answers rather than to have the answer. And then lastly, I'd say there's some time, and this is a while into the future, but the time kind of where we're up to now, and this is about making sure we move from adaptation to opportunity. And for me, this is about leading organizational renewal. And the first step of that, I don't want to go too far, is just to capture that. One of the last things I'd say here is that you need to have a process to capture the innovations, not to necessarily make sense of them or to craft a new normal, but to help your staff particularly to capture what they've been doing and what they've learned, so that you've got something to go back to and to get into when you're making future decisions.
Well, thank you so much. It gives us a lot to chew on, and we're also excited to bring you back for a webinar with even more kind of detail that we're hoping to have scheduled in the next month or so. And we appreciate your insight, your ability to be a step or 2 ahead of us. Thank you for the work in Australia and the rest of the places across the globe that you're working. So we'll be in touch. We'll make sure folks have access to some of your thinking, and look forward to being in touch again here shortly.
Look, Ed, it's been my pleasure. It's great to connect across the oceans, and look forward to seeing you in person sometime. All the best.
Thank you.